All right, so we're starting tonight on the world religion of atheism, and you're thinking, wait a minute, that's not a religion, that's sort of an anti-religion, isn't it? No, it's a religion. It really is, because if you think about it, it's a worldview that has many different components, and it's just like any others. It just takes God out of the equation. Last week I told you there's two different things between atheism and agnosticism, right? Atheism means no what? God, and agnosticism means no knowledge. We just don't know. And a lot of people who say they're atheists are really agnostics. They're just like, I don't know, maybe. You really can't know. And in some ways, y'all know the difference there. There are some people that say they are agnostics. Like they've really thought through it and go, I can't mentally get around it. And then some people are just lazy and they don't want to think about it. So I even think there's like lazy agnostics. They're like, oh, just, we can't really know about it, so whatever. Sort of important. You might want to figure that one out. So we've got this quote up here. How many of you have heard this quote before? Some of you have? So Obadiah wanted to sit in on the class today. He went with me to Lander for New Testament the other week, and he's like, are you teaching the class? I said, yeah, we're teaching. He said, well, I want to come take notes. And he walked in. He's like, God is dead. That's not true. I said, well, somebody made a quote about it. He's like, well, that's just ridiculous. And I said, well, that's what someone thinks. He's like, but that's not true. And I said, I agree with you, but this was a statement that came from Friedrich Nietzsche back earlier. This is from a book written called The Gay Science, and let me explain the whole quote. It says, God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? Did you catch all that? So he's a philosopher, once again, that was in the 1800s, and his whole concept was we're making so much progress in our thinking and our inventions and all our stuff, we've basically removed the need for God. Now, so when you read this comment and when you read this quote, I need you to make sure you understand this. He was not saying that at one time there was a God who existed and now he does not. He was saying there was once a time in civilization where mankind needed a concept of God to make himself feel better, to understand all the complexities of everything. So God was an invention of our minds to go, well, how did all this stuff come to be? And what's the point of life? And so God was an invention is what this philosophy would go. And now in the late 1800s, they said, look at all the enlightenment. Look at all the progress we're making. We can figure out all these kind of things going on in the world, so therefore we don't need God, right? That's sort of the mentality, which is very interesting because if you look, that last line was to say, must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? And that is, therein lies the big deal. If we remove God, a lofty God in the sky that's in control, that means that now we are what? Now, when Mr. Nietzsche is speaking, he's not saying, it says, does that mean that now I have levitational powers? He's not saying that. But he's saying, I'm now the master of my world. Nobody can tell me what to do. I'm the one who figures this out. I put all this stuff together. And so that concept really came about during those times to say this. Okay, there once was a time where we needed God to explain how the trees got here and how the first person got here, but now we're figuring all this stuff out and we don't need him anymore. And so this was a rallying cry for a lot of people, some of his teachings that God is dead. Now, if we were to go to Scripture, you may have ever had a conversation, and you may know someone that's close to you that is an atheist and believes that there is no God. Obviously, Psalm 14:1 and Psalm 53:1 are two good verses to start with. They basically say the same thing, just a little different word. Psalm 14:1 and Psalm 53:1. And they say this, the fool says in his heart, there is no what? God. Now that's a great verse for us, and it sort of goes, yeah, that's right. People that don't believe there's a God, you're a fool. The problem is this. If you don't believe there's a God, you don't believe that there are scriptures. So when someone says, the fool says in his heart there is no God, does that mean anything to that person? No, it's just an in-house kind of statement that we go, look. And so Psalm 14:1 and 53:1 says, fool says in his heart there is no God. They are evil, doing abominable deeds, practicing all types of iniquity. And so we can see that as a culture and say, man, how can you not? And some of you have been in one of those places where, think about just for a second, what is the most beautiful place you've ever been in your life? One of the most beautiful places you've ever been on a vacation, you've ever been on a trip, and you just went outside and looked at this. I have a family member who she says that she never goes anywhere. Her husband never takes her anywhere, and if she goes to 96, it's a big deal. So 96 for her, I guess, is the most beautiful place in creation. But some of you have been some pretty fantastic places, right? You've been somewhere where the mountains were just so amazing. Maybe you've been in the Grand Canyon. Maybe you've been in different places. And you're sitting around a group of people, maybe in your family or you've been friends, and you look at it and you go, how can anybody look at this and say there's not a God, right? We've been there. Well, plenty of people do. Plenty of people say, well, no, there is a reason why, and we believe that there isn't a God. And so there are many people that are saying, no, all this stuff has happened. And just so you to know, one interesting thing about his comments there, that we sort of become gods ourselves. Think about Genesis chapter 3. The temptation to eat of that tree was so that they could do what? They could know what God knows. And if we know what God knows, essentially we are what? God. Interesting fact that Isaiah chapter 14, you can write this down, Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28, Isaiah chapter 14, Ezekiel chapter 28, talk about Satan's fall from heaven. Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 speak of Satan's fall from heaven, and in both comments it says, you who wanted to ascend to the throne of the Most High. So Satan's job was he wanted to become who? God. And so when he tempts Adam and Eve, he's tempting them to be what? God themselves. And this is still going on today. This concept of, well, you know, if we can just remove God from the equation, all of a sudden we become gods. And we determine our own reality, and we determine our own morality, and we determine how we're going to live, right? If you take him out, it's just like if you were just to say you have a bunch of kids in your house, and all of a sudden dad and mom go for the weekend. Who's in charge? No one. Chaos is in charge now. And that's what would happen. And so in this moment, atheism is this belief that there is no God. I want to look, there's another quote we have next from another guy. You might recognize this fellow right here. His name would be Einstein, and this is a quote for him. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Isn't that an interesting comment from what many people would think would be the most brilliant mind that has been around in a long, long time? And you may find, well, I never knew that Einstein really had a belief in God. We're going to sort of talk a little about the story when it says science without religion is lame. Okay? Isn't that a really neat line? And religion without science is blind. And this is where we're going to sort of go in this whole atheism thing, because you cannot go to an atheist and say, hey, my Bible, written thousands of years ago by a guy by the name of King David, said, you're an idiot because you don't believe in him. Okay? That's just not going to work. It's not. And it's not also going to work just to say, you know what? I know Jesus lives because he lives in my heart. Well, they go, what does that even mean? You're going to have, if you have someone saying, I've thought through this and I don't even understand how could there be a creator God, you've got to start talking to them in some terms that they're doing. And so that means that we cannot divorce faith from science. And we can't just say we just check our heads at the door. And so one of the processes that I've gone through is to really think through, okay, does what I believe, does it match up with what we see? We talked a couple weeks ago about the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Y'all remember this? We talked about how they said, well, if you think a God created this, well, why couldn't this create this? And we've got to be able to come up with something like, I've thought through this in my head. It's more than just like this sort of grandiose idea. So what I want us to do, we're going to look at two arguments today, and we'll have to get the third next week. But today we're going to look at something called the cosmological argument, okay? Now, we're going to do a little bit of philosophy here. How many of you just love philosophy? This is just what you do on the weekend, exactly? Okay, yeah. Some of you are. Some of you are like, oh, no. I had a philosophy professor in college that you would leave class and you'd pinch yourself and go, am I even real? Like, he'd just make you think like this, I don't even know what's going on. And so here's what this is. Philosophical, phileo and Sophia, is the love of wisdom, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at an argument as people would debate in a cultural square, and this kind of stuff happens all the time. And they're going to debate, and you can't say Psalm 14:1, Scripture says you're an idiot because you don't believe in God. You've got to say, let's just talk. Let's debate a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's have a little conversation with someone who doesn't believe in God. And we're going to have to go at it sort of a middle-level road. And so we're going to look at three arguments that are philosophical arguments for the existence of a God, okay? This isn't going to get us to the end and say, and Jesus is his name. This is going to get us to the end and say, you got to at least admit that there may be a God out there. That's sort of the level playing field that you want to establish, okay? I'll go ahead and tell you all of what I'm going to present today, I presented in world religion courses at Lander. I did have a faculty member that was supposed to do some peer evaluation on me. sat in on one of these, said, well, do you have a certain day that you'd care? I said, you can come in anytime you want to. And he put on the date, and one of them was going to be on the teleological one, which we're going to get to, which talks about how the universe's design looks like somebody smart sort of monkeyed with the physics here to make sure this works. And I said, that'd be a great day for you to come. It's more like a science class anyway, what we're going to be doing that day. We're not even looking at Scripture. Come on. He was a little uncomfortable in that class that day. I'm just going to be straight with you. I mean, just really, really uncomfortable. Fidgeting in the seat, doing this a whole lot. And in fact, afterwards came up to me. First time he came through, and I taught him Buddhism. He thought it was very interesting and learned a whole lot. The second time he came up, he said, very interesting things you said today. I said, well, thank you. He said, I'd like to talk to you about some of those things because I believe they're a little dangerous to be teaching in an academic arena. I said, well, what's dangerous about them? He's like, well, it's just very religious, focus. I was like, well, this is a world religions course. But with that, I never once used a Bible verse today in this class at all. When we talk more about science and anything, I still just think it's a little dangerous. And I'd like to challenge a little bit of the things that you said. I said, challenge us, talk. Well, I got somewhere I have to go right now. I said, okay, well, that's fine. I said, what you doing for lunch? Well, I have a plan. I said, well, I'll email you. And I said, let's figure out a time to sit down. I never got the email back. I did get a review from him that said I was dangerous with some of my teaching and needed to be evaluated on a common, pretty regular basis. I was like, that's awesome, great, okay. I want you to look at this dangerous teaching that we're going to look at today. See if any of you are scared in your boots, you're scared to death. So we're going to talk about scientific principles because that comes straight from the book of Acts, right? Okay, scientific principles, the law of causality, which is this, the fundamental principle of science. This is basically this. Science is a search for causes, okay? Science is a search for causes. If you look at science and you look at what science is and the study of it is a search of causes. We want to know this exists, why? This happens, why? We want to see what it is that does this here, and we want to make sure that we can go, okay, that's why it is. So science is a complete search for causes. So let's do a little, we got 3 examples here. Like scientific experience, number 1 would be trace the causes for someone being homeless, okay? Write that down, I'll explain what that means. So if we were to say we wanted to find a search of causes, if you saw someone homeless today, could you trace a line of things that led to that person being homeless? Yeah. You start talking to the person and, they lost their job, or their parents didn't do this, or they got sick, they got laid off, it was an alcohol problems. You could trace these things to go back to the origination, right? Okay? Number 2, trace the causes of a flat tire. Could you trace the cause of a flat tire and go, okay, well, yeah, it was because I ran over a nail, or whatever it is. You could trace that cause. You could figure that out. And then our third option is this. Trace the causes of the existence of the universe. This is where we get into the cosmological cosmos, the universe. Trace the causes of the existence of the universe. When we look at the way the universe is made, we want to know, well, what was the cause of it? It's foundational for us to understand. If you're going to be in a conversation with atheists, what is the cause of it? Why? Now, one option obviously is what? Well, it just sort of happened. Well, maybe purpose. Let's look at the universe options. Number 1, here's our universe options. That the universe is eternal. That's 1. It's always been around forever. The universe is eternal. Or, number 2, something outside the universe is eternal. Those are your 2 options. If you can think of a third one, please tell me, and I'll add it to the list next time. But really, those are our 2 options. Either the universe is eternal, it's always existed in some kind of form, and when you go, yeah, but they say a Big Bang, well, there wasn't time before the Big Bang and something happened, so either that's always been eternal, the universe, some type of collision of atoms, and you name it, that's always been here, that was from the very beginning of time, or what? Something outside that universe started that off is eternal. One of those 2 things have to be true, okay? So when time began, whether it said, God said, let there be light, and there was the first day and first night, or when a Big Bang set off and everything started moving, one of those things was there at the beginning of time, so therefore it is eternal. Is that making sense? If it's making sense, say, oh yeah. Some of you are a little scared. Okay, we'll get there. We'll explain a little bit. So let's look at this. So we want to figure out, where did the cosmos come from? Where did the universe come from? So here's some scientific discoveries I want us to look at. We'll go back to Albert Einstein, and got just some things. We're going to run through these really quick. In 1916, Einstein's theory of general relativity seemed to be pointing to a definite beginning of all time, matter, and space. So as the more he's starting to do research, it looks like all of this stuff is moving backwards towards something starting it off. And since this discovery was irritating, is what he wrote in his journal, he introduced the cosmological constant. Okay? He introduced the cosmological constant. He did not like where his studies were going and his experiments were going. It was starting to look like there needed to be a start to all of this. So therefore, he invented something in his equations that was called the cosmological constant, that was just a made-up theory to say, well, something always had to be there. Now, what that is, I don't know, but it has to be there. This is the only way all this is working out. Gravity, Earth, universe, Big Bang, the way it's, all this kind of stuff, something had to be there constant, so I'm just going to introduce that into the equation. Just put it in there. Then we bring up to a guy by the name of Arthur Eddington. In 1919, he conducted an experiment during a solar eclipse that confirmed that the universe had a beginning. In 1919, he conducted an experiment during the solar eclipse that confirmed that the universe had a beginning. What he basically saw was, as the solar eclipse was happening, and through his readings and his all this equipment, he was seeing that the universe was moving. There was an expansion. It was growing. It was getting larger. And this is his quotation. "The notion of a beginning is repugnant to me. I should like to find a genuine loophole." Isn't that great? So in his notes, in his journal, he's writing this down going, I could see the universe getting bigger like that. If you just sort of go, it's like it's expanding, it's moving, something's happening. And that, if it's growing out, what does that mean? That there had to be a beginning, an origin, a start. It says repugnant to me. I would like to find a genuine loophole, and so we started looking for one. Then we bring in Edward Hubble, which we know for the what? The telescope, right? This is where Mr. Hubble comes in. In 1927, Hubble, through his 100-inch telescope, observed that the universe was expanding. So he started to look in, and this was that he could see the universe was actually expanding. It was growing. I mean, it was getting larger. And some of you go, that really happened? Yeah, it's expanding. So in 1929, Einstein made the pilgrimage to Mount Wilson to see for himself. He said, I got to see this. Let me get in your little telescope. Let me see what's going on. And what happened was he saw it. It blew his mind. I mean, completely just really scared him for a second. And this is what it put. At this time, Einstein stated that he wanted to know how God created the world. He wrote down, I want to know how God created the world. I am not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thought. The rest are details. Isn't that interesting? So here's the most brilliant man of the time, and what he's doing is he's seeing that if you were just to look, the universe is doing this, which meant at some time it was this, and he said, I realized that cosmological constant might actually be God. Now, I don't know his name, and I don't know everything about him, but I do know this. I want to know how he did it. And so he sort of starts searching for this. So here's the cosmological argument. I promise you guys are going to be experts at this in a second. Here we go. First thing. In any kind of philosophical argument, there's all these sort of little steps and processes that you got to go through. First one is this. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. Okay? Let me explain that. So we had a beginning to this class 2 weeks ago. What was the cause behind it? So we could educate and equip the people of our church to converse with other people of other religions and other worldviews so they could somewhat have a good footing. There was a cause behind this, right? We can say, hey, y'all want to get together? I don't know what we're going to talk about. You know, that there's a cause that there's PowerPoints and there's books and there's notes that you're going through. There's a cause behind this. So he then has a beginning, has to have a cause. B is this. The universe had a beginning, okay? The universe had a beginning. If you're looking at all the scientific data, it's all pointing to that there was a beginning. Something started this off. It is not eternal. So therefore, the universe had a cause. Now you're looking at this and going, so that's supposed to fix all of my issues right there. This is a philosophical argument that if you really start diving in, these guys will debate on these three premises for like hours and hours and hours, and it makes your head hurt. But the process is this. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. Okay, so if you can establish that the universe had a beginning, there had to be some sort of cause. Well, if the universe had a beginning and scientific evidence keeps pointing to there was a beginning, then therefore the universe had a cause. Well, who caused it? And that's where we start getting a little of that pushback. Okay, is it an accident? Was there a cause? So here's something, you see SURGE, there's an acronym for the Big Bang. Since these discoveries, there's 5 lines of scientific evidence have been discovered to reveal the beginning to the universe. And we're going to look into this, and some of you are like, oh, this is a world religions course. Why are we even, this really is going to help you. Hopefully it is. Some of you are nerds about this, and you love learning it, and some of you are like, you need to go take a nap. And that'll be fine either way. We're going to help walk you through this. But here's what I want to get at. If y'all ever been somewhere you see on the news like so-and-so has just come up with this discovery and it's going to just flatten, Christianity or belief in God, and you're like, oh no, what is it? Or they're like, we found this archaeological thing and it says that Jesus was actually here, and everybody's like, oh no, what is this going to come out with? What you're actually finding is that the more that people are finding scientifically, it's lining up with what's in the Bible rather than vice versa. The more that it's happening and the more that stuff is going, you start going, that kind of sounds like Genesis, or sort of like what was saying in Job, or it's starting to sound like it. And so what this process is when you start, I love learning stuff about science, because the more that I do, I go, wow, God, that's incredible. It's not an enemy to faith. It's a beautiful thing to go, wow, look at how you started all that stuff off. So if we're talking about just completely, what's the beginning of the universe, here's some things that scientific stuff, once again, this is gonna whet some of your appetites, and some of you are like, let's move on to the next thing, and then that's fine. If you guys are really into this stuff, I'm going to give you 2 resources just to write down, because we're going to fly through this. One is called The Case for a Creator by Lee Strobel. Is a very good read. Case for a Creator, Lee Strobel. Another great read is called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norm Geisler. I mentioned this, I think, last week. There's a lot of other great resources as well. Ken Ham is a guy that does tons of stuff. In fact, some of you might have seen, I posted this a while back, that Ken Ham had a debate with Bill Nye the Science Guy. I don't know if y'all saw that. It was about a 2-hour debate where they talked about is creationism even a logical, entertaining thought kind of deal. There's a lot of great stuff. So if this gets you going, this is good stuff to think about. But let's look at these couple things really quick. And if I'm wrong at any point, y'all can stop me. This is the first one. This is the S in SURGE. Okay, this will be an acrostic for the Big Bang. S is the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics. And what that means is the universe is running out of usable energy. Okay? So now, let me explain something. You're going, wait a minute, Big Bang. You're saying that there's a Big Bang? Yes, I believe that there was a Big Bang. I believe that God started the Big Bang. I believe when he says, let there be light, bang. It went fast. It illuminated. He said heavens, whoom. Solars, galaxies, this kind of stuff. So yeah, I do believe that there was a Big Bang, and science is going, it looks like there was nothing and then just kept getting bigger. It's like the lights and stars started popping. I'm going, yeah, I know the name of the Big Bang. His name is God. That was the Big Bang. So when people say, well, you have to believe in either God or a big, no, you believe that God, if you're to think that in one moment God spoke and the earth existed and the heavens existed and the stars existed, I think that classifies as a Big Bang. There's nothing, and then all of a sudden, whoom, just stuff that we were not even going to be able to see with our telescopes, the biggest stuff, and it's out there. Yeah, I imagine that if you were to rewind that tape, it would be nothing, and then all of a sudden, whoom, there would be. And so what you see is this. Second law of thermodynamics, when you look at this, the universe is running out of usable energy. Imagine a flashlight with batteries. The lights are going dimmer over time. And when you look at the universe, that's what's happening right now. Scientists will look at it and go, it looks like that we're just running out of energy, and one day there's going to be nothing. And as some of you, before you start packing your pantry with all kinds of, Y2K survival kits, just calm down. It's not like tomorrow, but scientists are saying it looks like the flashlight bulb is dimming, like the batteries are going out, which means at some time, what was it? The light was fully on. The battery was fully charged. Well, so if it's decreasing, that means that there was a place where it was full 100% on. Your phone was already charged, but then you used it, and it's going down, and it's going to go out. So scientists are saying we can tell there's a difference. It's happening. It's going away, which points to the fact that at one point there was 100%. Complete bars, everything going. Here's the U. Oh, we've already mentioned this, but the universe is expanding. The universe is expanding. If we could press rewind, the universe would shrink back to nothing. Something caused a Big Bang to happen. Wouldn't that be great if we just had a videotape? We just press rewind. Oh, there it is. But it is, as scientific evidence is saying, the universe is expanding and it is moving and going out, this kind of stuff. And so if you press rewind, it all go back to something, and something had to trip it off. And once again, there's this collision of atoms theory, and it just sort of happened, or is there an intelligent design that said, like, phew, it came on. The R stands for radiation from the Big Bang. A cosmic afterglow exists. There's a afterglow that people can tell from the Big Bang, and science does all these kind of research stuff, that they believe that it's actually light and heat from the original Big Bang, sort of like it's radiating something, like there's this explosion and there's leftover kind of residue from it. And so many scientific evidences believe that there is radiation from the Big Bang that sort of says, hey, that something just popped it off, and it was with so much force that there's still leftover from it. The G stands for Great Galaxy Seeds. You go, this is a great band name, Great Galaxy Seeds. These seeds reveal variations in the temperature of cosmic background radiation. And what that means is this is what I want you to really get. The explosion and expansion of the universe was precisely tweaked to begin, but not to collapse on itself. So what these great galaxy seeds sort of show is that this Big Bang happened, that things go boom like this. But if it wasn't held in, it's just going to scatter out and never be brought together. And so it's like this something happened that sparked this, and it's like going shoom, but not that far. Well, how do you do that? I mean, if you're throwing, something in that direction, it's not like it goes, and then it just sort of stops. It's like it just, with so much force, just stuff started going, and then it stopped, so it did not even collapse on itself or get too scattered. And so scientists are going, yeah, it looks like that it was just like boom, and out of nothing, and there was nothingness, and all of a sudden there's just crazy, all the energy, and this chaos that's happening, and then all of a sudden it just stops. Why? Why would it just stop? Oh, it's going, however many crazy amounts of energy, so fast, so furious, and then all of a sudden, that's it. So everybody goes, that's interesting. How did that happen? Well, nobody knows. You can't really say, oh, that's exactly how that happened because we were there. You can't see it, but it's almost like that it starts and then it stops. And then the E stands for this, Einstein's theory on general relativity. This mathematical theory came back to demand a beginning. The more and more he researched, it looks like there has to be a start somewhere. There has to be a start. I want to show you a couple of just pictures, drawings, renderings of some things from our galaxy. So this is an old picture, not old drawing, because you see what's at the bottom right? Poor Pluto. I still think he's a planet. I'm just saying. I learned he was a planet when I was young. He's still a planet to me, okay? All right, so you see the size of Earth compared to Jupiter? It's pretty crazy, isn't it? I mean, this is just in our little tiny neighborhood of the galaxy. When you look at it, we think of Earth. I mean, if you just think about Greenwood, do you know everybody in Greenwood? No, I don't even know everybody in South Carolina, then the United States, and you go to a world. So big, so much happening, and then you go, Jupiter. I mean, look at Neptune compared to us. I mean, just Earth is tiny, 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 tiny. And just in our little solar system, it's just a tiny little speck. Let's move out a little bit further. Let's look at this together, the next one. This is what the Earth looks like next to our sun. If you were to look at the size of what we got compared to the Earth, does that make anybody seem really small? Just like, whoa. Do you also see why we don't want to be too close to that thing? We'll get to that in a second. Let's pull back a little bit more. So this would be the approximate size of the Earth if it was nearing the sun, by the way. You obviously can just see a little curvature of it, but you just see like how tiny of a speck we are compared just to what's giving us light and heat today, okay? Next. So this is the sun now compared to some of the other stars just a little bit further out from us. So the sun is actually one of the smallest stars in the galaxy, if you didn't realize that. It's not that impressive, okay? And you go, but if we were near it, we'd blow up. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be next to that one, Arcturus. Or let's go a little bit further back. There's Betelgeuse here, which is really big, and the sun is 1 pixel on the screen up here at the top, if you can see it. That's another star just that's in our galaxy that you move further back. Now you understand why that one's not taking care of our sun and our light and our heat. So you even look at us and you go, whoa, that means we're just so tiny. Just look at our sun and we go, oh, it's so big. Jupiter's so big. And then Jupiter's small to our sun, but you start even looking at some of the stars and they're even greater and bigger and more powerful. So some of you are like, there have to be aliens out there, right? What's the purpose of all that? We'll get there in a second. Next one. Let's look at this. So there's pictures, and once again, you just think about this, that these are just sort of a a shot of stars far, far away, and one of the dimmer ones is our sun. Further back you go, it just shows how tiny it is. Well, if one of these little dim lights that's running out of energy is so dim compared to the others, then you can't even see Earth on it. Let's look at the next one really quick. This is what the sun speck would look like if you go further and further out into our Milky Way. Just tiny. I mean, it's not even, it's just a speck in the whole grand scheme of things. Let's look at one more. So that's the Earth, if you didn't realize that. There's a lot of stuff happening there. We're just a little speck on top of that. Now, if you think about this, unless you do believe in aliens, and we can talk about that at another time, every single person, every single civilization, every single language, every single war has been fought, every single religion has been birthed on that planet. And yet such a tiny speck in the whole grand scheme of things. In fact, let's go to our next picture. This picture was taken from the Voyager in 1990. It was a spacecraft that just kept going further and further out, just taking pictures to get an idea of what the galaxy looked like. It was 3.7 billion miles away from the Earth. And do you see that little speck at the top right above those words? Can you see the little pale little dot? It just so happened that there was this little dust thing that came about, and they were able to identify it 3.7 billion miles away. That's Earth. That's Earth. And it just so happened that this layer from another star let it get in perspective just enough. And then let's go to the next page, and this is from Carl Sagan. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. You see at the top left now? That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter or forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Sort of just you think about it going, and you start going 3.7 billion miles away, and it's not even like it's called the pale blue dot. 1990, just all kinds of studies went out around it. And the reason why I want to bring that to you is that, so I'm showing this at a lander class one day, and we're walking through some of this stuff, and I've dismissed class, and a student in the back did something you're not supposed to do once class has been dismissed. They had a question. I mean, I've literally dismissed them. And they said, I got a question, Dr. Agnew. And I said, yeah. I said, what's your question? Everyone's like, and she said, if that's true, do you think there are aliens out there? And I said, no. And she said, then what's all the point of all that other stuff, the planets and galaxies and stars? And like, it makes no sense to me when I look at it, because I go, if all that's for us, the universe seems pretty oversized. And I said, I cannot agree with you more. If all that is for us, it is very, very oversized. But if it is intended to declare the glory of God, it's just getting started. So what the heavens do, Psalm 19, what? They declare the glory of God. You look up and you go, so we're just this pale dot in the sunbeam, and our sun ain't even the biggest, and we're not even the biggest planet. What does that mean? Your God is big. And when you look at the universe and you look at creation, what's crazy about it is it brings me closer to God. It doesn't scare me. Well, maybe we're not. The more I read, the more I study, the more things that I look at it and research on different things, you look at it and go, surely there has to be God. In fact, I want you just to write down Psalm 19, and I want you to really, and by the side, put verse, just the whole thing. I didn't ask you to bring your Bibles with you, but there's a really, really interesting thing that happens here. Psalm 19, verse 1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The sky above proclaims his handiwork. And that first stanza talks all about creation. And I said it says, the heavens declare the glory of who? God. It's the Hebrew word Elohim, which just is a standard creator God. So it talks about creation and that there is a God and that the heavens declares glory. And you can look out at the night skyscape and say, obviously there's a God. Then, verse 7 says, the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. So now he's talking about this. First stanza, he's talking about creation, and he says, The heavens declare the glory of who? God, Elohim. And know this, that word could be used for anybody speaking of any God. But then it gets to verse 7, it says the law of the who? Lord. And in your Bible, if you have many of the translations, that word will be in all capital letters, which means that it's speaking of Yahweh, the name I am who I am, the one true God. So get this. Creation is supposed to go, there has to be a God. But God's word tells us who that God is. See the difference? So somebody goes, I just like to be out there in creation and just sort of experience God there. It'll get you so far. But the word is what's going to come and say, okay, now let me explain who he is. So I know there's a God, but I look at the creation, I look at the cosmos, I can see that, but then I get in the word and I find out his name. I find out who he is. I find his heartbeat. And so there's both in. So you look at creation, you go, wow, there's an incredible God. So all that's happening. And then I want you to look at, there's this guy, Robert Jastrow, that you have here on the side. Born in 1925, 2008, nanophysicist. He worked for NASA for years. He wrote a book called God and the Astronomers. He was a self-proclaimed atheist, and everybody in the scientific community was like, yes, he's going to write something. He's just going to destroy all these guys. And he starts in this book about how astronomy and NASA is making all of these advances. And at the very end of his book, look at this quote. At this moment, it seems as though science will never be able to raise the curtain on the mystery of creation. For the scientist who has lived by his what? Faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance, is about to conquer the highest peak, and as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Did you get what he just wrote? This self-proclaimed atheist, and as from what I read, in 2008 when he died, he still was there. But yet he said, he writes this book, oh, we're finding it in NASA, we do this, blah, blah, blah. And he basically saying this, for all of our discoveries, the best commentary on what we look at the universe is to go back to Genesis. And the scientific community went nuts, absolutely nuts, and said, how in the world could you say something like that? And he says, the more you look at it, the more it looks like somebody started this off. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, it goes down to, it's the same concept of, okay, I can believe that all the people in this room are here by accident, or I can believe that someone created them. What takes more faith? And if you think about this, like if there's a supreme being that said, I'm going to make it like this, or with just this puddle of goo went to this, and then all of a sudden now we're here taking notes on a PowerPoint. Like, you have to look at it and go, what takes more faith? Could that happen? Sure. Could that be a random thing? In the same way, could a random explosion of something, all right, think about this. There was nothing, and then those nothings met together and exploded into something. That still hurts my head a little bit. And then all of a sudden we're here. So then you take the same kind of thing. Okay, so if there is this explosion and it's going, boom, it's just going crazy, and all of a sudden it goes, just hits the brakes. What takes more faith in that moment to say, well, it just happened to hit the brakes. We don't know why, it just did. Or something bigger than the universe said, brakes. I mean, literally put his foot down, so that's enough. And so, yeah, I mean, somebody could say, well, couldn't there? And you can debate all types of stuff, but it really comes down to, you're really saying, I got to have more faith to believe that chaos is just literally going through the universe and all of a sudden it stops. It takes a lot more faith to do that than to say someone bigger and older than the universe said, that's enough, no more. And so, as far as debates, I'd look into some other stuff and I have to go back and look for a couple other ideas. But really, when you get down to it, you're making arguments based on that no one can investigate because we can't witness it. No one was a witness for it. So we're just theorizing and postulating, going, well, maybe it happened this way, this kind of stuff, and going. So at the end of the day, what takes more faith to say that it just sort of was going out of control and then all of a sudden it just literally hit the brakes, or that somebody hit the brakes for it? So, great question. But when you look at that, and you look at these different guys, and the more and more they look, that's what's crazy about Jastrow for me. That he says, the more discoveries we find, it's like these scientific communities, like we're building, and all of a sudden, we're finally going to get the mountaintop. And there's a bunch of theologians sitting here going, y'all just got here? Come on. We've been here for centuries. There was someone who created this. And so the more and more you look at it, the more and more you look, it seems that if God has start this off. Real quickly, I want us to look through the teleological argument. The teleological argument is from the Greek word telos, which means design. And here's the argument. Every design has a designer, right? That makes sense. Well, the universe has a highly complex design. Therefore, the universe had a designer. You guys are so smart. So, every design has a designer. And if you look at the universe, it has a highly complex design. Just like what Bruce is saying, it's not just by happen chance. There's somebody saying the brakes here and tweak this there. So if that's the case, then therefore the universe had a designer. And once again, this is where I got in trouble with these dangerous ideas. I'm not giving the designer a name. I'm just saying perhaps, okay, maybe. Here's an example. Every watch requires a what? Watchmaker. Every watch requires a watchmaker. If you have a watch on right now, do you believe that just appeared one day? No. You think, well, somebody made that. Because it's why? Why do you say that? It's complex. It's very detailed. It has a purpose. Well, I even left my Walmart watch at the house that cost me $15. Is that Walmart $15 watch more impressive than the universe? No. The watch is impressive. It's got these little gadgets, and it's got a little night light, and it turns on at this time, and it adjusts that. That's impressive. But the universe? So we look at the watch and say, well, surely someone had a designer there. We look at the universe and go, no, that just sort of happened. That just happened. In fact, imagine finding a diamond-studded Rolex on the ground. Some of you are like, where? Do you conclude that wind, rain, and erosion made that? No. You go, somebody left their watch here. They lost it. Well, the universe is so much more complex than a diamond-studded Rolex. It serves more functions, serves more capabilities. There's all kinds of different intricacies throughout it. There's so much more going on. There is no doubt that an intelligent being made that. Earth is much more complex than a Rolex. Sort of rhymes. I like that. Earth is much more complex than a Rolex. So if you look at that and you go, well, surely somebody created. I mean, look at this building, okay? Do you walk in and just go, man, it's just incredible. I mean, just wind and rain and just some stuff happening. Here we are. You go, that's ridiculous. Well, this FLC is not more impressive than the universe, the cosmos. I mean, no. There's so much more specific natures about this. Anthropic constants, I want us to look at this really quick. The definition of this is they are precise and interdependent environmental conditions. Okay? Precise and interdependent environmental conditions. That's a fancy title for the mounting evidence that has many scientists believing that the universe is designed to support human life here on Earth. So, let me give you an example. So, the cosmological argument says there had to be a cause for the cosmos. Somebody had to start it. The teleological says, now just look at the design of it, how specific it is. Come on, there had to be a designer here. So, one is the cause, one is the designer. So to show these anthropic constants, we'll use the Apollo 13 mission to show the intricacies of the Earth in relation to other planets in the universe. Some of you remember this event in your life? Some, if not, some of you watched the movie, okay? Apollo 13, the third manned lunar landing mission in 1970. 2 days after the launch, the spacecraft was crippled by an explosion from an oxygen tank. The mission was called a successful failure because here's what they realized. To sustain life in the chaotic area of space, you have to make the environmental conditions where you were living so specific or else you'll die. So what they had to do is they looked at the way the Earth was made so they could make sure the spacecraft could get them back and model how the Earth was made. Okay? So let's follow along. We're going to look at a few of these constants here. The first one, anthropic constant number 1, is the oxygen level. Okay? Oxygen level. On Apollo 13, the oxygen tank number 2 exploded. Damaged tank number 1 and led to a shortage of electricity and water. Okay, so the oxygen tank exploded, damaged tank number 1 in the process. It led to a shortage of electricity and water. The crew had to shut down heat, and they could only drink 1 cup of water a day. Now, if you take that, that's Apollo 13. So here they are. Think about this. They're in a little spaceship navigating through the cosmos, okay, the space. So you have to have the oxygen level at a certain level to sustain life, right? And where do you find out what that oxygen level is? Look at the only place in the universe where that works, and that is the planet called Earth. Okay, you guys are so smart. So let's look at Earth. Oxygen comprises 21% of our atmosphere, okay? 21% of our atmosphere is oxygen. If it were 25%, fires would erupt spontaneously on Earth. The oxygen would just, fires would just literally, and if it were 15%, human beings would suffocate. And yet it's at what? 21%. So you just look at it, it's right there. Too much here, fire's going to break out. Too much here, we're going to suffocate, but it's just right there. Why? Mars isn't like that, Venus isn't like that. It's just Earth. So why is it just so happen that it's just right at the level? Number 2, look at Apollo 13. There's something called atmospheric transparency. Atmospheric transparency. If we look at Apollo 13, some of y'all are going to go get the movie tonight, right? You're like, I got to look at it now. Apollo 13, the re-entry into Earth had to be perfect. If they re-entered at less than 5.5 degrees, okay, think about an angle, okay, 5.5 degrees. If they entered at less than that, their ship would skip off the Earth's atmosphere. It would come in and literally pop off and go off. If they re-entered at more than 7.3 degrees below the Earth's horizon, they would burn up into steep of a descent. You see how specific that is? How specific? Them just to get back in. Just a degree here, and they're gone. Here's how that relates to Earth. If the atmosphere was less transparent, not enough solar radiation would reach the Earth's surface. If it were more transparent, we would be bombarded with far too much solar radiation, right? So, and that's why a lot of us use sunblock, right? Because, well, it was just, there's this kind of deal. But if the transparency was just a little bit tweaked this way or a little bit tweaked that way, either we're going to burn up or whatnot. Number 3, Moon-Earth gravitational interaction. Because I know that's what you woke up thinking about this morning. Moon-Earth gravitational interaction. When you look at Apollo 13, they encountered this constant when they had a sling around the moon. They're having to use the gravitational interaction between the moon and the Earth to get around this spot. If you look at Earth, if the interaction were greater than it currently is, tidal effects on the oceans, atmosphere, and rotational period would be too severe. Be out any chaos. If it were less, orbital changes would cause climatic instabilities. In either event, life on Earth will be impossible, but yet gravitational interaction between the Earth and the moon is just right. Just right. Go too far this way, this happens. Too far this way, that happens. Is this making sense so far? Y'all can teach this to somebody? Great. Okay. Number 4, carbon dioxide level. Carbon dioxide level. On Apollo 13, as the astronauts consume oxygen, they are producing carbon dioxide through exhaling. So they're breathing in and out, and what they're exhaling is carbon dioxide. If they can't change the filters, they will actually be poisoned by their own breath. And some of you are like, I think I've been poisoned by someone else's breath. No, they're going to be poisoned by their own. Carbon dioxide is going to be out. They've got to get filters established. The filters in the ship, guess what? Were the wrong size. Would that be embarrassing? How about the filters? I went to Lowe's, man. I got the wrong size. Wrong size. So they had to create a filter through an ingenious use of cardboard, space suit hoses, stowage bags, and duct tape, which fixes everything. So that's how they had to do it. They had to create filters. So if you look at Earth, the CO2 level were higher than it is now. A runaway greenhouse effect would develop. Basically, we would all burn up. If the level were lower than it is now, plants would not be able to maintain efficient photosynthesis. We would all suffocate. You see how specific this is? Just by accident, by the way. Number 5, gravity. Gravity. On Apollo 13, once they began re-entry, Congress and the Pope calling the world to pray. They will be entering Earth's gravity to a maximum velocity of nearly 25,000 miles per hour. That's 7 miles per second if you're counting. Parachutes have to correspond with gravity to re-enter Earth. And so if you look at Earth, what that means, if the gravitational force were altered by 0.3701%, okay, I don't have time to write all that out, the sun would not exist and neither would mankind. Just the gravity level, if it just changes a little bit, everything's chaotic. And so what this does is you look at the design of the Earth and you go, by chance, I mean, this far here, we suffocate. This far here, it's the same kind of thing with sun. If we're in Venus, what happens to us? We burn up. If we go to Mars, what happens? We freeze to death. Right there. That's it. The only place that life has ever been found, right there. You get too close to one planet over, you burn up and you die. One planet back and you freeze to death. And yet we're right here. And so the teleological argument is, come on, just look at it. Look at the specifics. Look at the nature. It looks like somebody, there's literally a scientist who, I forget the guy who wrote it, but he said, it looks like somebody monkeyed with the physics of it all. I buy that. Sounds good to me. It sounds like a really good plan. Look at this really quick. I want to show you this as we're talking about the design of human life. Also, Apollo 13, like Earth, was designed to maintain human life in a very hostile Environment of space. Next, there are more than 100 very narrowly defined constants that strongly point to an intelligent designer. When you look at the earth, the way things are done, it looks like, come on, there's specific nature here. One more thing I want to show you really quick. So this, what makes a design intelligent? This is a good question, okay? So one morning, I get up in our house, and I look at our table, and this is what I see. There's this alphabet box somehow had gone through the pantry door. The pantry door's open. The alphabet box flew over on the table, fell over on its side, and then a few letters spilled out. And when I looked at it, it said Travis, comma, take out the trash. And I thought, isn't that just an amazing accident? That's just incredible that it could happen like that. Because that's exactly what I would think if I woke up in the morning and saw that, right? Isn't that what you would think? No, you would think someone is trying to do what? Give me a message, or else this will be what you're eating the rest of your life, okay? We look at that and go, well, surely somebody did that. I agree with you. And yet this earth, your bodies, our minds are so much more complex than that. That seems laughable to say, well, surely that just sort of happened. That seems laughable. And yet there are many people who believe that something even greater than that was done in that way. Let's look at this really quick. We'll run through these naturalist beliefs, the design of human life when it comes down to it. Naturalists, biologists assert that life generated spontaneously from non-living chemicals by natural laws without any intelligent intervention. All of life originated from a one-celled animal known as an amoeba. DNA discovery. I wish we had time to look at all this stuff, but you look at DNA discovery and how all this stuff is put together and how precise it is. It's crazy. Look at the origin of first life. No human observed the origin of the first life. If we can't directly observe the past, we must use principles that can help us discover what caused the first life. The principle of something called uniformity, the principle of uniformity, causes in the past were like causes we observe today. So even if we can't observe what happened then, we can look at what happens now and say, well, maybe it happened like that back then. So we assume that the world worked in the past like it works today, especially when it comes to causes. So what causes can we observe that are responsible for human life? Because this is where it comes down to. Okay, the universe and the earth is made that way, but what about the human life? Here's types of causes. Number one is something called natural causes. Natural causes. Natural causes, you can turn the page. Here's an example of a natural cause, the Grand Canyon. We can conclude that natural processes, particularly water erosion, were responsible for the Grand Canyon. It's still happening today. You go to the Grand Canyon, you go, man, that's incredible. You still see the water going down. It's still going deeper. You can measure that. You can scientifically say, yeah, I get that. It's happening. It's a natural cause, okay? It just is happening. Then there's a difference. Number two is something called intelligent causes, okay? There's natural causes like the Grand Canyon and something called intelligent causes. Here's an intelligent cause. Mount Rushmore. Common sense would never suggest that the presidential faces were the result of natural laws, right? Look at these two pictures in your book. I've had the privilege to go to both of these. Both of them are spectacular. Both of them are amazing to behold. And I look at one of them and go, wow, just look at how natural processes created that. And you don't look at Mount Rushmore and go, man, that water, rain, and erosion thing's crazy. Nuts. Look at it. That just blows my... How did that happen like that? You don't. But you can't look at one and say, that's impressive. Look at how that happened and through natural... Sure, because it's happening today. Next to Lincoln, we're not continuing getting all the different presidential faces. It's just sort of happening, by the great states of America. It just sort of happens by all the energy and patriotism flowing through the country. It doesn't happen that way. Why? Because there was somebody who said, I'm going to make these four faces, and they carved it. And so what you look at the human life is this, as you say, are they by natural causes or by intelligent causes? That's the big deal, because they're both. Both of them are here, okay? So yes, you look at a Grand Canyon, and it's beautiful, but it's not precise. It's not, well, I'm going to make this nose here, and it's like that Mount Rushmore is. And so one is a beautiful natural cause, and one is a beautiful intelligent cause. In fact, I want us to look at the next slide, and then we're gonna wrap up here. You don't have these in your notes, but we're just going to have to go along with it. Hit the next. The human mind is said to contain information that could fill some 20 million volumes. Just your mind. You're like, really? The human mind is said to contain information that can fill some 20 million volumes. In the Madison Square Garden, there are 20,000 seats. You would have to stack 1,000 books on each and every seat to hold that many volumes. Get that in your head for a second. That's what's inside your head right now. You're like, I can't access it. It's just information, okay? Like, that's the bathroom over there. That's part of it, okay? I'm not saying you're going to, whatever. The question is, can natural causes be responsible for that type of information? Your mind, just your mind. They can contain that type of information, figure things out. Could that just be a natural cause or an intelligent cause come about that? Did someone say, no, it's going to be like this? It's going to be created like this. And so when you look at these two arguments, one cosmological, one teleological, one is something started all this off. Number two, look at the design and the intricacies of all this. It goes, all right, I don't know his name, like Psalm 19 says, but I got to say this, there is a God. I don't know his name. I haven't figured everything out about him, but I do look at him and say there is. So when you look at that, those are two. We're going to look next week at something called the moral argument, and then we're going to jump into Hinduism, which will be really, really fun. But as you look at study through this, I hope you're starting to go, man, that sort of stretched my mind a little bit, but just to realize this. You can have a civilized conversation with someone who believes completely different than you and say, hey, let's just talk about what we see and what we know and we exist. Look at our minds, look at our bodies, this kind of stuff. I tell you one thing, the most incredible faith-building thing of my life was when this little kid right here was born. I mean, just the whole process of having a child and what happens with a mother's body before and during and after, and then on day 3 it starts doing this, and yet in the womb it does. I'm going, really? Really? That, okay, you follow all the traces. Let's follow the reason while Obadiah is here, and you say, what all had to happen to this kind of stuff? Like, so that just sort of happens. Was one of the most faith-enriching things. Go, wow, look how intricate and how specific and how intentional God is with all these things. And so when you start looking at some of these things, hopefully it's going to stretch your faith and cause you not just to say, man, I don't understand this stuff. Say, we serve a great, great God. Amen? See y'all next.